Hi, church family. Fran Underwood here. Happy Wednesday. Not many of you know that part of my heritage is from the county of Cornwall in England. So far, we have traced my paternal grandfather's line back to the late 1600s, and I'm 1/4 Cornish. Cornwall is the southwestmost part of England, and if you've watched Paul Dark on PBS, you've seen a depiction of the mining like my ancestors might have done. Cornwall is famous for tin, copper, and clay mining, and for the ministries of John and Charles Wesley, the founders of the Methodist movement. The Wesley brothers spent years sharing the word of God with the working classes throughout Cornwall. They preached in hamlets and in towns and in the huge amphitheater Gwinnett Pit. My 4 times great-grandfather was a young adult in one of those towns and may have actually heard Charles Wesley preach. His son was baptized in the town's Methodist chapel. One of the many things that the Wesleys did was to work toward social justice in a time in England when the poor were especially oppressed. I'd like to share with you a story of how the people of Cornwall joined the Wesleys to work for justice. The title is No Sugar for Me. Author Reverend Julian Drew, the late minister of a Methodist chapel in Cornwall, explains why a protest campaign more than 200 years ago means that many people in Cornwall, even to this day, refuse to take sugar in their tea. Reverend Drew writes, 1835 saw the final abolition of slavery in the last part of the then British Empire. One of the key figures in the abolitionist movement was John Wesley, who was one of the founders of the Methodist movement. The Methodist Church was and still is very strong in Cornwall. It was almost the established church in Cornwall. Most of us who were reared here were taught not to have sugar in our tea because Mr. Wesley said that we shouldn't, as a protest against the slave trade. Slaves were used in sugar production, and Mr. Wesley thought that a boycott of sugar by devout Methodists would be a good way of showing disapproval of a trade which he despised. It was perhaps one of the earliest examples of people power. Wesley became interested in slavery when he went to what was then the British colony of Georgia in America in 1736. There he saw slavery around him and saw the conditions in which the slaves lived and worked and how they were treated. It was about 40 years after his trip to Georgia that the abolitionist movement was starting to take off. Wesley's own experience of slavery in Georgia was still on his mind. So he set about writing his pamphlet called Thoughts Upon Slavery. It contained a very careful and considered approach to the issue. He set out for everybody to read the conditions in which the slaves were kept and worked. Here is an excerpt from Thoughts Upon Slavery by John Wesley. When the vessels arrive at their destined port, the Negroes are again exposed naked to the eyes of all that flock together and the examination of their purchasers. Then they are separated to the plantations of their several masters to see each other no more. Here you see mothers hanging over their daughters, bedewing their naked breasts with tears, and daughters clinging to their parents till the whipper soon obliges them to part. And what can be more wretched than the condition that they then enter upon? Banished from their country, from their friends and relations forever, from every comfort of life, they are reduced to a state scarce any way preferable to that of beasts of burden. The time they work in the West Indies is from daybreak to noon, and from 2 o'clock till dark, during which time they are attended by overseers, who, if they think them dilatory, or think anything not so well done as it should be, whip them most unmercifully, so that you may see their bodies long after, wealed and scarred, usually from shoulder to waist. Did the Creator intend that the noblest creatures in this visible world should live such a life as this? Although it was a carefully set out piece of work, the pamphlet was not without emotion. It was very clear that Wesley considered the slave trade utterly immoral and inhuman, and not something that anyone who called himself a man would be involved in. Another excerpt from Thoughts Upon Slavery. Are you a man? Then you should have an human heart. But do you indeed? What is your heart made of? Is there no such principle as compassion there? Do you never feel another's pain? Have you no sympathy, no sense of human woe, no pity for the miserable? When you saw the flowing eyes, the heaving breasts, or the bleeding sides and tortured limbs of your fellow creatures, was you a stone or a brute? Did you look upon them with the eyes of a tiger? When you squeezed the agonizing creatures down in the ship, or when you threw their poor, mangled remains into the sea, had you no relenting? Did not one tear drop from your eye, one sigh escape from your breast? Do you feel no relenting now? If you do not, you must go on till the measure of your iniquities is full. Then will the great God deal with you, as you have dealt with them, and require all their blood at your hands. Wesley made his views on slavery known in his sermons and speeches, as well as in his writing. He wasn't afraid to carry his message to the heart of the slave trade in ports like Liverpool and Bristol. On one occasion in Bristol, Wesley was preaching to a large gathering which descended into uproar and violence. It's thought that the slavers sent people into the crowd to disrupt the meeting. It was more than 200 years ago that early people power helped bring an end to slavery. So it's remarkable that many of my congregation and other Methodists across Cornwall and around the country still refuse sugar in their tea on account of Mr. Wesley. I'm proud that I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Methodist. I learned how to drink tea from my grandfather, who learned from his Cornish parents. I can tell you, I don't put sugar in my tea, not even when it's iced. There is no need now to exclude sugar from our tea, but there is a huge need for people to stand up for what is right. There is still racial injustice and injury woven into the fabric of our lives, and we must preach the message of social justice to the heart of our neighborhoods and towns. I encourage you to read Stamped, our church-wide book study, and to participate in the social justice activities that the church is rolling out over the next few months. Claim your Methodist heritage. Stand up like the Wesleys and the Cornish people did, and work for social justice. Black lives still matter. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
Storm